And the next panel is going to bring a bunch of knowledge, and most importantly, has a moderator whose name I should not butcher. And the moderator has worked for over 20 years in the music industry, which transitioned into working cannabis events, and then he has joined Hello Cannabis's educational platform, and in 2017, he started managing Hello Cannabis's Goodbye Opioid campaign, a very important campaign. And please give a warm welcome to Mr. Ben Risben.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. If you're following along in your guides, you might notice there's a bit of a change in the schedule here. There was a transit issue, so two of the physicians won't be here today, but my friend Bubba's going to be here, and I assure you it was a transit issue, and there was no procrastination due to cannabis. Hi, Tamara, how are you? So, I have the esteemed pleasure. I also only found out because of this that I was going to be moderating this panel last night, so if you'll excuse me, I'm going to be referring to my notes. I have the extreme pleasure of introducing my colleagues here. At the end, I have my dear friend, Bubba Nicholson. Bubba played an integral role in bringing the Movember campaign. Are we familiar with Movember? Yeah? Bubba played an integral role in the early success of the Movember campaign in the US. In Canada, he is a legend in the networking hospitality industry. He is also the newly appointed president of Hello Cannabis. So please put your hands together for my friend Bubba. Next to Bubba is Dr. Alan Greenspoon. Dr. Alan Greenspoon is a family physician with special interest in occupational health. He has been instrumental in leveraging many key partnerships with corporate clients to maintain safe and productive workplaces. Please put your hands together for Dr. Alan Greenspoon. Next to Dr. Greenspoon is the founder and chairman of Hello Cannabis Medical Education Centers, as well as founder and president of GR Nurseries and Labs, a licensed producer focused exclusively on medical genetic cultivation and propagation. I said that right. So put your hands together for Stephen Verbeek. Thank you so much. So, without further ado, I'm just going to hop right into the question, or hop right into the interview and the questions. If that's all right with you, and it's going to have to be, because that's what I'm doing. Sorry about that. Stephen, please tell us about the Canadian medical landscape from the patient perspective.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for your time. I've been a medical cannabis patient for about 7 years now, and I did notice that there was quite a lot of accessibility problems in Canada. I come from a world where we are the second largest consumer of opioids, and I've personally seen it ravage a few families, including some of my own members. And I do believe that cannabis has a massive potential to be able to curb the opioid epidemic that's now moving globally. 7 years ago, I had sustained a very traumatic injury that had put me on the equivalent of 6 milligrams of Dilaudid every 4 hours. For those of you that aren't familiar with Dilaudid, it is for every 1 milligram of morphine, Dilaudid is, for every 5.5 milligrams of morphine is the equivalent of 1 milligram of Dilaudid. So to transfer that to recreational use, from what I've been told by physicians, is a recreational user would use 2 milligrams of Dilaudid to get high. So essentially I was taking enough to get high 3 times every 4 hours. I had a 3-month prescription, and I truly found that was overkill. And many people were not able to get off that type of addiction. I was in a privileged position to be able to do that, and I'd love to touch on that story in a bit. However, with respect to the medical landscape in Canada, we did notice that there was not enough education, there was not enough accessibility, and there was not enough physicians that were knowledgeable or comfortable enough to be able to prescribe cannabis. It's still a relatively unknown substance. Back 7 years ago, there was less than 5% of physicians prescribing. As of last year, I believe there was 9. And we are now, I believe, not working linearly, but exponentially, and starting to find that we are almost at 20% of physicians that are more comfortable prescribing. So as I certainly don't want to take any aggressive credit for this, but I do strongly believe that educational clinics and support networks like Hello Cannabis and many other clinics that are available and spreading and growing in Canada will help these physicians get educated, and will be able to help them provide better duty of care for their patients, and will ultimately allow for greater access. And Dr. Jay-Z had the perfect segue into this, as he was stating that education is absolutely pivotal in order to help destigmatize cannabis and to be able to help patients get access to this. And I truly believe that cannabis should potentially be the first step to pain medication as opposed to an exit to medication to deal with symptoms from opioid addiction, which is often the first step that physicians are using to cope, to treat.
Fabulous, fabulous. Did you, from the Dr. Greenspoon, the same question, but maybe from the physician perspective?
My interest in cannabis started when I realized that in my hometown of Hamilton, Ontario, at least one person died every day from opiates. In Vancouver, British Columbia, up to 10 people die every day from opiates. And the scary number is, in the United States, I've heard numbers up to every 3 weeks, the same number of people die from opiates that died in the 9/11 Twin Tower disaster, but up to 2,700 people every 3 weeks, 88 people a day. So I knew we had to do something about opiates. The other thing is our College of Physicians and Surgeons have come up with regulations and guidelines. And in British Columbia, they did a study, a good study, evidence-based study, where they determined 100 milligrams a day of morphine or that equivalent is safe. So in Ontario, they arbitrarily said if 100 milligrams a day is safe in British Columbia, then 90 milligrams will be safe in Ontario. So we have to get our patients off opiates. And we need to use other natural health products, and cannabis is obviously a great opportunity. But as a general practitioner, I'm a generalist, I'm not a specialist. And I needed to rely on educational clinics to educate my patients. And that's why I've looked to Hello Cannabis to help me learn about cannabis and help my patients learn about cannabis.
Amazing. Bubba, this one's going to be for you, pal. From your unique perspective, why do you feel that education is so important for patients?
Right now, with what's happening with the stigma of cannabis, what we're finding out is that our patient age is about 54 to 60 years old is our average patient age coming into the clinics right now. And so there's a huge need for information. We're taking a look at a generation of people that have grown up through this cannabis prohibition who have been told that cannabis is the worst thing you could ever do. And now they're starting to turn around, and as we share this amazing information and the right information and educate people, we're having them turn around and say, well, maybe I'd like to take a look at it. And in Canada, we're in sort of a neat spot right now as we start to look at legalization. There's a lot of information being shared. And it's our job as well to take a look at that information that's being shared on Facebook or wherever it is and do the research. Because there's a lot of false information that's going on out there right now as well. And the problem is that we're so quick to just press send or, oh, Ben's my friend and I love Ben, he always prints funny stuff, so I'm just gonna send it.
I do.
Well, we got to start taking a look at those articles because we're sending a lot of false information out there and it's actually setting us back. The more we can talk about it, the more we can have conversation about it, we're just going to find that more physicians are getting into it. I recently just had back surgery. I was on, not as bad as Stephen, but I was on gabapentin, 1,200 milligrams of naproxen, hydromorphone cotin, hydromorphone PMS, and another pill as well. And I started using the cannabis oils. I got off of the 1,200 milligrams of naproxen almost within 2 weeks. And the hydromorphone made me so dumb and fuzzy-headed, I started vaping a high CBD cannabis at a low temperature for breakthrough pain. It took me off 6 extra pills a day just by being able to do that. So it's having these conversations, everybody telling their stories, sharing their stories about cannabis, and really just opening up that conversation. That's what's going to help us right now. And we're finding, I spoke to 2 physicians while I was going through. My surgeon is now on board with us. He's prescribing cannabis. He's using Hello Cannabis to educate his patients. Now he's off talking to physicians. They're actually starting he just sent me this yesterday. They're starting a clinical study on prescriptions in the orthopedic settings on cannabis and treating musculoskeletal pain. This is just from a conversation where we started talking about cannabis, educating, and now we're getting clinical studies done right in our backyard. It's pretty amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, please, put your hands together.
That was literally yesterday.
I cried a little. It was pretty big.
I just want to add one more clinical trial that we're doing. I actually do research in the delivery of cannabis, but The reason that there hasn't been tremendous clinical trials so far is because, and still is, cannabis is illegal, and so it's hard to do large clinical trials. However, there have been lots of trials around the world, particularly here in Germany. There's evidence out of Australia and Israel. We're starting a clinical trial on using cannabis for acute pain management following surgery as well, under the chief of surgery at St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton. So we're very excited about that. It's starting, and it will happen.
These trials are happening all around the world, and it's our job out there as the cannabis advocates in us to start sharing that information. We don't work at Hello Cannabis and say we want to be the only cannabis education clinic. We want everybody out there educating. So this conference and places like this are amazing because we can start sharing that information. A study that happens in Germany is equally as important in Canada. So we need to start sharing that information and getting the good stuff out there so that people can see the difference.
I agree. Stephen, why is education important for patient access from your perspective?
So I'll touch on a very personal story, and to be candid, this is actually the first time that I've said it in a public setting. It was a rather humbling experience, if you can put all of these stereotypes together. I grew up as an investment banker. I was still am a chartered investment manager. I was a derivatives trader and portfolio manager for RBC Dominion Securities. Candidly, it's the largest investment firm in Canada, and was quite young at that. Captain of the city championship soccer team. Again, my head didn't fit through doors. I was an avid climber. I was very good at it at one point, and for a split second I was very, very bad at it, and I fell 22 feet. The injury I suffered was called bilateral calcaneus fractures. In layman's terms, I shattered my feet. I was by myself. I was able to get carried out, thankfully. Spent 6 months in a wheelchair, and 17 screws was what was required to put my feet together that are still present to this day. My orthopedic surgeon, who's actually participating in this clinical trial, he's the number one person on that list, had stated that this is arguably one of the most painful surgeries that you can endure. It's essentially getting nailed to the cross 17 times with metal screws. It was rather excruciating. So I came out of this, and I touched on this earlier, where I was taking 6 milligrams of Dilaudid every single 4 hours. I was literally in a comatose. I had spent 7 days completely in a hospital bed. I was able to get transitioned to my home, where I was more or less horizontal for 23 hours a day, and literally had to relearn how to time and learn to walk by crawling first. Had I known that cannabis would have been able to help offset the damage and addiction that comes with opioids, you would damn well bet that I would have done this. So I'm extremely grateful that we are now working with the Orthopedic Society to look at using cannabis as a way to curb and potentially marginally disrupt the amount of opioids that are being required for excruciating surgeries that will cause a lot of chronic pain and chronic arthritis and PTSD. One thing that I'm very grateful for is I was in a very privileged position. I was working in a very lucrative industry. I had some savings. My friends were able to build a wheelchair ramp for me. I had a family and close-knit friends that were able to take care of me, and I'm not naive to that fact. Many people that come out of these surgeries are nowhere near as privileged as I am, and I'll say I hung on by a thread. I barely actually got out of this. The vast majority of people don't, and I spent some time to be able to volunteer at the fracture clinic to try and be able to empower people and tell them that they actually can do this. And to say that these people are at rock bottom is, I think, a valid statement, because I myself felt that I was there as well. One thing that helped me get out of this is when you're metabolizing a narcotic and you're taking it every single 4 hours, at about the 3-hour mark, you're metabolizing a narcotic and there was less of it in your system, so pain starts. At the same time, you're also narcotics. So it was about 7 weeks into it, so nearly 2 months, when I started realizing that I was able to tolerate pain. However, my cravings were getting larger and larger and larger. So as you're weaning off, addictive properties. Now, some cravings for the narcotic, one either being to manage pain and the other to manage the addiction. And I recognized that my addiction was starting to become more pronounced for the reasons why I couldn't wait for those 4 hours to be over. I had a surgical wound that became infected, so I had a nurse that was visiting me twice a day to dress it and treat it with silver nitrate, another wonderfully painful experience. I realized that I could actually start tolerating this pain. So when I realized that it was the addiction that was taking over, not the pain management, I quit cold turkey. I'm sure you gathered I'm not a large fella, and I dropped 15 pounds in 4 days. I didn't sleep for 4 days. I'd like to say that I don't suffer from any chronic mental health issues, rather grounded, educated individual, and you completely lose your mind. You go into a state of complete delirium. The description that I could give is essentially going completely anemic, which was something that happened to me from blood loss as well, so I'm familiar with that feeling. It's hopelessness, essentially. So this wound care specialist was monitoring me and saw that I was slipping into a dark hole, literally to the point of brink of death, and said, "You need to eat, you need to sleep." And I said, "I can't. I was not physically capable of even swallowing. I could not hold water down. There was no chance of even processing food." So she suggested, she's like, "If you're not eating, you're not sleeping. Are you familiar with cannabis?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a Dutch guy from Vancouver, but unfortunately, we got drug tested at the investment firm, and I was naive enough to think that I was going to be a professional soccer player one day. So I didn't use cannabis recreationally anymore." So she's like, "Do your friends?" And I said, "Probably 9 out of 10." So I made a phone call, and I'm sorry, Dr. Greenspoon, I know no physician would condone smoking cannabis. I'm not going to argue that you can't derive medicinal benefits from smoking cannabis, but it's clearly not a healthy way of inducing this medicine. So anyways, that is what I did. I called a friend, and he came over with a bong and some cannabis, and I smoked. And next thing that happened is I slept, and then I ate, and then I smoked again, and I slept, and I ate. And I repeated that for about 5 days. And 4 days of absolute rock bottom hell was offset by 6 days of blissful cannabis and reading and video games. It was quite a nice change in my life. I was very good at Skyrim, by the way. I killed a lot of dragons. So I came from a position of privilege, and I barely got through this. And the opioid epidemic is real, particularly in North America. It's rampant. And we started this campaign to be able to help educate people and be able to help bringing more physicians into this. And now we're at a point where we have orthopedic surgeons that are looking at substituting the narcotics like Dilaudid with cannabis use. So access is starting to get there. Back when I needed to get a prescription after meeting this nurse practitioner that said you should get cannabis, I had to literally find a doctor. I wired $450 Canadian to them, and it was a Skype conversation with a doctor from BC. The College of Physicians extremely frowns upon this extremely. So it was a quote-unquote shady deal. It was a real doctor, it was a real prescription, and I still hold it to this day. But that's not access. And I would not have known about this if I did not have a massive infection in my wound, and had a nurse that was educated on cannabis and had seen her own anecdotal evidence that it works. So that is, again, why I would emphasize that access is extremely important. And the more that we can educate physicians, and the more that we can talk about stories like this, and go beyond anecdotal evidence that people like Dr. Greenspoon sees in his backyard, and start actually being able to get clinical trials, we can make a dramatic impact on arguably one of the biggest epidemics that we are facing in the medical world right now. So now, thankfully, in Canada, we've been marginally disrupting this by educating more physicians, and I think we are at almost 20% of physicians that are comfortable with this. And if they are not comfortable prescribing it, we have not heard from one that is not comfortable referring a patient to us to be able to take on that educational component and be that duty of care for their patient. So access was very difficult 7 years ago in Canada, and I believe Germany is probably about where we were at about 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that can change if you are looking at people that have experience in this with respect to education. They have the materials, they have the guidance. We learned the hard way by trying to figure out how patient flow in traffic works, and we've discovered a model that actually works. And we have seen now with over 1,000 patients and over 30 referring physicians, I think 9 prescribing, let alone the 19 surgeons that just signed up for this clinical trial, that we've made a positive impact on that. And that was the genuine goal from day one. And cannabis, I do not want to be melodramatic and say cannabis saved my life. But if you were to ask me what the inflection point was from my recovery, it was quitting opioids, and then 4 days later using cannabis to curb the symptoms of quitting opioids. And that's how I'm able to stand here to this day and still play competitive soccer and live a life as opposed to being a synthetic heroin addict. So thank you, cannabis, and thank you, Germany.
Please.
Following Stephen is a hard act to follow, but in fact, it's not a smart thing to do. I don't consider myself a smart doctor. In fact, what do they call the dumbest kid in your medical school class? Doctor, exactly, scary. So, but just some more anecdotal evidence. There's a Dr. Lydia Hatcher. She's the head of the pain clinic at McMaster University. She has somewhere between 500 and 1,000 patients on cannabis. She's been able to reduce her opiate use by 67% and her benzodiazepam by 43%. Further to Dr. Jay-Z's recommendations, more than half the people that have an accidental or intentional overdose of opiates are on a combination of an opiate plus a benzodiazepam, like Valium, lorazepam, clonazepam. It's so important that we get these people off drugs. Yet it's my responsibility as a physician to provide education to the patients when I prescribe it. And there's lots of you out there who know a lot more than about cannabis than I do. So that's why I turned to Stephen. Stephen, I want to prescribe cannabis, but I need your help to educate the patients and to educate me. And that's what Hello Cannabis has done for me, and that's what Hello Cannabis International will do for everyone here too.
I'm going to open this one up to the whole panel. I'm just curious to know, how would any of you approach a physician who is, say, opposed to cannabis to maybe open their minds?
I mean, there's several ways to do it. For me, it was just simple conversation with physicians. Whenever I am going to meet them, sort of feel them out and see how they're feeling about cannabis. The next step is to just start throwing as much anecdotal evidence as humanly possible into the conversation while I have 4 minutes in front of them. And then from that point, it's hopefully being able to get another physician like Dr. Greenspoon to be able to go and have that conversation and seal the deal. And by sharing resources and sharing physicians, that's how we're going to keep building this community and how we're going to keep educating. And I just really, everybody's been stressing it this week and it's been amazing. It's all about education. The more we talk, the more we stifle misinformation, and the more we get it out there, we're going to make it a lot easier for all of ourselves.
I agree. That's awesome. Maybe you can talk to us, and all of you, again, I'll open it up to the panel, but talk to us about how Hello Cannabis has had an impact on accessibility in our area and has impacted patients and physicians in the medical space.
Okay. So we've touched on some of these numbers in previous discussions that we've had today, but we have seen firsthand the impact just within 3 hospitals and 5 medical centers that we are in. As soon as we were able to get one physician to be able to open up and start sending patients to us, typically a prescription ranges anywhere from 3 to 12 months. We've kept it at 3 months, so that way we were able to keep on top of these patients and be able to actually track how they are doing and what titration methods they are using, and be able to, as Dr. Jay-Z said, go low and slow. When those patients come back, and I'll let Dr. Greenspoon touch on this, I will say firsthand that we are seeing a dramatic positive impact. We're seeing a massive reduction in painkillers. We are now seeing patients using this for insomnia. This was something that I suffered from back when I was trading on Bay Street. I would not be able to sleep, and I would you stare at your alarm clock and like, holy crap, it's 3 a.m. I got to wake up in 2 hours. Like, this is nuts. And you still show up and you work, and you look like a heroin addict just from insomnia. So I was prescribed something called Zopiclone, and my family physician said that this is a non-addictive, safe prescription for you. It's going to be far better for you than any other sleep aid. And I recently found out from new evidence that had come out, I was prescribed this 10 years ago, is that you are not supposed to use this prescription for more than a week. And I had a 6-month supply of it, using it, and they wanted me to use this daily. So when we keep talking about misinformation, these are things that cannabis has been able to completely replace. My mother, who's never been intoxicated in her entire life, who suffers from hypertension and insomnia, now takes a 1-to-1 CBD THC oil, and quote unquote, she says, I have happy dreams and I've never slept so well in my life. Now, us getting into these medical centers and meeting one physician and being able to talk either about my own personal story or to be able to get an in through one of our strategic partners. We have an advisory board with 6 physicians that love our story, believe in our story, and have seen the impact it's had on their practice. They open up the doors to other physicians for us. Unfortunately, physicians aren't overly open to talking to businessmen like myself. You do have to have an introduction from another physician. So that was kind of our ticket in to be able to start helping access and getting this penetration of physicians to start looking at this. And in our own backyard, we have now seen a dramatic increase in the amount of physicians that are prescribing and the amount of physicians that are sending us patients for referrals. Our business has been growing literally exponentially, and we are having a hard time keeping up with the demand of patients that are trying to either get off of opioids or are looking at natural health products to replace these synthetic products that are, in my opinion, absolutely decimating our population. So our evidence is unfortunately anecdotal. I promise you, when we are here next year, we will have clinical trial evidence, and we will be able to actually show real figures as to how many people we have been able to help. I promise you that the impact is massive. We come from a city of 600,000 people, and I could say that we have firsthand already had a material impact there in less than 1 year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to reinforce Stephen's statement, in my old position, I did some PR work for some dispensaries. When the dispensary model went the way it did in Ontario, I moved into legal work. But one of my duties there was to manage their social media, and literally dozens and dozens of messages would come in a week thanking the company in question, MMJ Canada, it was. For allowing access. It was getting them off opioids, it was getting them off junk, that was their term, it was getting them off even alcohol. So education is definitely key to harm reduction, and that's a good look for everybody in cannabis, everybody who's in this industry. This is something we should all get behind from my perspective. That being said, we're going to come to the question and answer portion of the panel, I believe.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions?
I'm sure we do. Who's got a question? Let's hear it again. Let's hear it again for the panel once again. It's fantastic. Anyone have any questions? Take your time. I know you probably had an edible or two after lunch. There we go. Okay.
I should probably know this, and I will look at your website, but can you tell me a little bit more about Hello Cannabis, how you're funded, structured, et cetera?
Yeah, I certainly don't mind sharing the business model behind us. As I was saying before, in order for me to get a cannabis prescription, I had to pay a wire transfer to a physician literally across the country, and then be connected via a Skype broadcast, which was quite strange to me. In all of Canada, we have access to medication and no-hip free of charge. I believe that needs to be conducive with cannabis as well, and that was one of the major reasons why we still have a difficult time with accessibility. So our services are completely free. We are funded and financed by licensed producers. Many of them are, their business model is, of course, to be able to help patients, and patients purchase cannabis from them. So as we are sourcing specific products that we believe have the highest efficacy for specific ailments. And this is data that we are mining as fast and furiously as possible to be able to help physicians like Dr. Greenspoon find the best product for the specific ailment of each individual person. And I do believe that that's paramount. Licensed producers compensate us for those referrals. I do believe that I was taking these 6 pills every single 4 hours. You metabolize narcotics differently, hourly, daily, and there are so many variables that will change how you metabolize a narcotic, whether it's sleep, whether it's how much you've ate. So when you were self-medicating with cannabis, as Dr. Jay-Z touched on this again, God, I love saying that name, it's great. When Dr. Jay-Z touched on this as well, and to go low and slow, but there are so many different variables that can affect how cannabis will metabolize and how it will affect you psychoactively. So that's why I think having a company like Hello Cannabis to be able to help those people on that journey and be a resource. We have live chat immediately on our website. Patients have full access to be able to talk to one of our educators. We are all medical cannabis users. We all understand self-medication. And I truly believe that you will metabolize a narcotic differently based on stress, sleep, and many, many, many other variables. So it does require multiple touches. So to provide those services, we get compensated through licensed producers. The company was founded and self-funded. So it was bootstrapped and grown literally from the ground up with just a few decent contacts, my black book of contacts, and a cell phone and a couch. And that was a couple of years ago. And now it's grown to Hello Cannabis International, where we are open and have already started providing some of our services in Europe.
Fantastic. From the couch to the world. Oh, sorry.
Just to add something to that, when a patient comes in to see me because they can't sleep, and I decide to prescribe a form of Valium, let's say lorazepam, to help them sleep, it's a controlled substance. I talk to them about the risks and the benefits, and then I prescribe it. I don't charge the patient for that service. It's part of the Ontario Health Insurance Plan. It's free. They have a number. So if somebody needs cannabis, the same argument goes. It's a controlled substance. I discuss the risks and the benefits, and then I prescribe it. Why should I charge them for cannabis when I haven't charged them for Valium? So the college frowns upon charging patients for cannabis. A lot of doctors still do, and they're subject to a complaint. They're in trouble. Hello Cannabis allows me to make the prescription, send the patient to the educational clinic that does a lot of the work for me so that I don't have to spend the extra time myself. I also should tell you that I've been a doctor for more than 40 years. I delivered babies for 35 years, more than 3,500 babies. The nicest patients I've ever met are the cannabis patients. They're usually a bit older, 55, 60, they need education. They're the nicest patients that I have.
And back to the original business model and what you guys were saying is that original pay $300, go see a physician, and then you're forced to buy your cannabis through one conduit. And what we've realized is that everybody's symptoms are different. Everybody's ailments are different. And in Canada, we're so blessed to have so much amazing medicine from now, I think as of this week, 93 licensed producers, that it's actually unethical for us to force somebody down one conduit. And that's why we started searching out for these different relationships so that we can go and find the absolute best medicine for our patients and take care of them. If somebody doesn't like the flavor of their CBD oil, well, we'll move them over to someone like Tilray who's coming out with capsules. We have that ability, and by hitting that touch point, following up holistically with those patients at 3 months, we have the ability to say, how's your titration going? How are you enjoying your medicine? Are you finding that it's working for you? Would you like us to switch your prescription to another licensed producer? Because we can do that for you as well. And by doing that, we're giving that extra attention. It comes back to education, and those people are going out and they're having that conversation. And when you have 60-year-old ladies at Bridge Club on Friday night talking about what kind of CBD oils they're on and what their next LP is going to be like, that's what we're seeing happen right now. And it's amazing. It's unbelievable.
We're right here. Go.
I'm sorry?
Hello, my name is Benjamin Bajak, and I have to thank for this wonderful things you make. And if it's possible to find doctors and pharmacists here in Germany that will to make this wonderful thing for the people in Germany. We will sit together and talk together about it. It will be good thing. It will be wonderful. Let's make wonderful things. I thank you.
Thank you.
Love that.
Let's
Thank
have
you.
a beer.
You change it to hello cannabis.
Absolutely.
So I'll talk a little bit about the branding as well. Hello Cannabis is clearly pretty in your face with respect to cannabis. You know what we're about. It truly is a suffix for goodbye opioids, though. The whole concept was goodbye opioids, hello cannabis. However, we didn't just want to pigeonhole ourselves to only being able to help opioid addiction. We know that it does help many other ailments. But yes, Hello Cannabis is here specifically to be able to help people get off of opioids. And now we're finding many other ailments that this wonderful product is actually helping with. So thank you, and we look forward to hopefully being able to help Germany and hopefully be able to educate your physicians to be able to make sure that you don't fall under the exact same path that North America has fallen under, which is an opioid absolute epidemic, which is ravaging our countries right now.
One more time. Oh, I had. So you guys you said your patients all fill out a survey, so you're going to have more studies and things. How many patients do you have right now? I forgot.
Forgive me, can you repeat the question?
How many patients do you have right now? They're all filling out surveys and
We're about
forms, so you can
1,000 patients through the.
Sorry.
About 1,000 patients.
Yeah, so we had gone through beta testing for about 8 months to make sure that we were actually, our business model had worked and we were able to sustain the growth that I knew was going to become exponential. We had our grand opening at our first clinic about 4 months ago. This has been about a 24-month project that over the last year and a half has finally kind of come to fruition. We are now adding between 20 and 40 patients a day. We had just opened up our telemed services where we were able to go nationally. And because we had limitations on advertising, which Ben had started the Goodbye Opioids campaign. He's quite well connected in the music industry. We're now throwing events almost on a bi-weekly basis, and that is conducive of Hello Cannabis, and the word is spreading rapidly. I would not be surprised if by next month we are adding 50 patients a day. The goal is 7,500 patients by the end of the year. I think we're going to smash that.
I should mention that as a doctor, we do intakes, we do measurable outcomes. We actually measure their pain level. 75% of the patients are pain. There's anxiety, post-traumatic stress, nausea, etc. But 75% of the patients are chronic pain. We have measurable outcomes. We follow them every 3 months. We make sure they're getting better. And that's what Hello Cannabis does as well.
Great. Okay, I'm coming over there.
Love it.
Be easier if I had a jetpack. I could just float. No, someone
say
should
that every
invent one
day.
for next year. Maybe a teleportation device.
Hi, Stephen. You just mentioned that you are planning to go to Europe as well and open some subsidiaries. You have any idea, or in terms of time, when you're trying to approach Germany?
Last week.
Okay, thank you very much.
We've already been approached by 4 countries so far, even just at this event. I do believe that we have the supply, the business model, and sustainability to be able to actually bring physicians out and be able to have speakers, to be able to get them out at conventions, to be able to get them to start speaking one-on-one. The only thing that would probably slow us down is the language barrier. Unfortunately, we are monolinguists, not polyglots like most of Europe. It's rather embarrassing. But we do have physicians that I think are extremely reputable, charismatic, and will be able to speak at a very high level to other physicians to educate them in Europe. It looks like Lithuania, Denmark, and Germany are going to be our first stops.
Any other questions?
I'm looking. Fantastic. I don't think anyone has any more questions. Do you guys want to make a few closing remarks?
I personally, I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the whole panel, but I would just like to thank ICBC for having us all out. It's really important that we all get together and build our community and share information, and I'd like you to put your hands together for this group right here.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex.
All right, give it up, you guys. Canadian physicians. This is a big thing, a lot of analogy in German. One more time. Thanks, you guys. Thanks, you guys, so much.